Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Okay, well, you know how I was thinking about this week about how, looking for topics to talk about for SciTech Culture and, because it's like so broad with SciTech Culture, we could be talking about anything. And then occasionally a story comes along that kind of wipes the whole slate clear and says, nah, we're talking about you this week. I don't know about you, Steve, but I thought the GameStop story, I just saw it and said, yeah, we're talking about that.
I mean, this is SciTech Culture defined.
Yes.
This is science, it's technology, and it's culture all in one.
And I just the more I keep returning to it with the latest iteration of whatever's going on with it, the more I love it. It's just hilarious to me. It's got like that sort of iconic David versus Goliath aspect to it. There's all this the whole hilarious reaction from hedge funds saying, "Oh no, we need regulation to put this out, to stop this stuff," when they do the same thing just at a higher level and all of that.
That's right.
The fact that in the internet age, which is really the only way that this was possible in the first place, that a group of people on Reddit could just bandy together and go, nah, we're not going to let you get away with that. Let's have a go at this. And they've kind of set a precedent to see if that can actually continue. And the latest, we can talk about various aspects of it. But another part that I thought was interesting was that after those apps like Robinhood and whatever else, the trading apps put a freeze on the buying by these Redditors, they actually started going out and through Reddit to seek help from other Redditors who didn't have it disabled in other countries to keep purchasing like the GameStop stocks and others as well. So GameStop was the headline, but there were some other stocks featured in it. This whole thing is just like a snowball effect, and it's like they've all gone to war.
It's just, look, we say it all the time, the world's gone crazy, and this is just one of those crazy things that happens in the modern world. It's so many different things all at once. I don't think it's as simple or as clear cut as the GameStop story, but gee, it's a great story. So one thing, let's peel back all the layers. So one thing we've seen apparently over the last 12 months, if you believe a lot of the stories behind this, is the rise of the sort of celebrity investor who goes online and you can invest in the same stocks as them. Mm-hmm. And that's a very modern thing. Like that's something that couldn't have happened years ago. That's basically an influencer. So you have a public influencer who allegedly picks stocks, and there are these platforms that curate these people, and then you like, their Instagram photos, and they've made 20% this year, so you buy the same stocks. Now that's just crazy, but this is the way it's working. And apparently with COVID shutdowns and people having stimulus money, apparently, I find it hard to believe, but sitting around with stimulus money, nothing to do, they've jumped on the internet.
And there's only so many games you can play and Netflix shows you can watch after all.
That's right. And let's face it, I don't care what the big boys say. Stock market investing, if you like to trade frequently, is nothing but a game anyway. Mm-hmm. They'll pretend differently, but, because they're masters of the universe.
Well, the classic line out of all of this is that these big Wall Street guys who treat the market like a casino are complaining when the everyday investor treats it like a casino.
Exactly. And so, anyone who considers themselves a serious investor probably goes to web-based platforms that aren't Reddit, and they all either congratulate themselves or bitch about underperforming companies that they've invested in, penny dreadful, small market caps, et cetera, and they keep on gambling and keep on trying to cajole each other into either buying or selling depending on whatever benefits them. So that's the way the market works anyway.
Yeah.
We now have these platforms that don't charge a trade fee. So they're like Robinhood that have become very popular. And we have platforms like Reddit now instead of the usual investing platforms that probably have a bit more moderation. where people speak freely about what they're going to do. And of course, when retail investors band together, and I think that there was 1 million people on that Reddit site, now 5 million. You can imagine if they each spend $1,000 each, that's 1,000 million. That's $1 billion of investment.
They become their own little hedge fund, right?
That's right. A loose collective of individuals with no particular idea or greater plan other than to make the hedge funds bleed. And the narrative for the GameStop, and I think there's a cute aspect to the GameStop thing, is because one, it's about gaming. And if there's two things that are related to the internet besides porn, the other one would be gaming. And so these guys, they game. They've probably been using GameStop for years. Who knows? Maybe they just like the notion of gaming or games. Isn't it banded together?
But isn't it because, and this is what highlights the stupidity of the market value of this company going through the roof, is that it's actually working on a retail store business model, which is kind of on the way out, which is why those hedge funds were shorting against it anyway. And I just think it kind of shows that what's the value of anything with these things anyway, when it's all just subject to this kind of speculation.
Well, exactly. The establishment is complaining, the valuation of GameStop, doesn't look at the fundamentals of the business and all that. Well, these same people were investing in Amazon, before the dot-com bust, when it had, no revenues that could match its price. So, it's whichever way you want to look at it, whichever period, whichever time frame. And the purpose of shorting, if you believe I guess the investment markets, is to ensure that you don't get runaway share pricing as we're seeing with GameStop. So what would have happened, because GameStop was going the same way as Blockbuster, effectively, with their business model, the hedge funds have shorted, which is effectively, and you can look up shorting, and this isn't exactly how it works, but they're taking a bet basically that the share price will fall by selling borrowed shares in GameStop. And then, of course, what they do is they buy them at the lower price. The price goes up and they make money.
Yeah.
So what happened, of course, is the GameStop retail investors, or our Reddit friends or whoever they are, basically forced the price up, which forces potential unlimited losses on the hedge funds who have bought in, saying that the price they will buy in 3 months' time at whatever price GameStop is. Of course, GameStop has gone up, not down. And then, of course, what happens is on the way up, hedge funds will be buying anyway to cover their short position. So whatever we're seeing with the price of GameStop, you can be sure that hedge funds have driven it up. And the first person to pull the Jenga piece out at the bottom is actually going to be the winner.
Well, and that's the part that I enjoyed out of this story, that the hedge funds got caught napping in a way, because and it's not just that they caught napping; they got stung. And I didn't see any sort of sympathy for them more broadly with how that was going. But one of the other effects that I saw, though, was that those trading apps removed the buy button from those quote unquote retail investors who the mom and pop ones, or in this case the Redditors, and then the arguments that sort of kicked off after that. So they did it because they wanted to, put a lid on how crazy it was going, and it could have actually exposed them to issues in terms of potentially shares that didn't exist getting sold, etc. That was the argument I heard for it. And then against it, it was like, they're the ones they've now stepped in and they're manipulating the market, because by removing the buy button, it's going to drive the price down again, and it's going to screw over the little investor. And again, it's like that's what I'm finding so fascinating about this story, is that it feeds on itself. I think there may potentially be some fallout, particularly as it seemed to have made its way into the political realm. And this is another aspect I found fascinating, is that the left and the right jumped all over it, and they were agreeing with each other about what was going on. And when does that happen in this day and age?
Exactly. But look, the irony of all of this is this is driven by government policy post GFC. So the endless stimulus has to go somewhere. And when you're getting zero interest rates on savings, the only thing you can do is shove it on bets on the stock market. And it seemed to be okay for the hedge funds to do it and profit out of the GFC. And, the argument would be now that for the retail investors, they band together as a loose collective hedge fund, and it's not all right. So, look, the general truth is that, whoever wins at the expense of someone else in the share market. And, I think that, well, I don't know. It is a David and Goliath battle in many ways, but people could get burnt. And the thing you worry about is that if you burn too many retail investors, then ultimately the share market and all the big end of town will suffer anyway.
Well, just finally, before we move on to our second topic for today, the one thing I did want to mention is that I thought it was just impressive that through Reddit and also knowing what the Reddit community is like, that almost was like the perfect platform to launch something like this, because yes, Facebook is like something that can bring people together or whatever, but the general type of user that's on Reddit and and the way they moderate content, for instance, on their site, etc., was probably more conducive for them to sort of bandy together and support each other for that sort of stuff, which I thought was interesting as well, and a very interesting aspect of the story.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. And we have to remember, though, that, since 2012, when Facebook listed itself on the share market, their business model has not been to allow people to come together. In fact, they restrict it as best as possible. Because it's an advertising platform. If you want to get a message out effectively on Facebook, you got to pay. Yep. So, or someone has to pay. So, Reddit is an open platform, and to that end, it's quite genuine in its intent. So, you can be quite critical of what perhaps these people on the Reddit platform are doing or thinking, maybe in terms of their judgment. I think maybe in terms of their intent is separate to that might be a higher intent with low judgment if you want to make that call, but ultimately at least it's kind of genuine. Yeah,
indeed. And I guess just finally, maybe those hedge funds will finally get that wealth trickling down to them now instead of the other way around. All right, so let's have a look at another story now, and this has been an ongoing one too. So it's been brewing for a while, ever since Apple announced that they were going to introduce ad tracking and blocking directly into iOS, and that it would be impacting apps that do this. It caught the ire of the big Zuck over at Facebook, given that that's the entire sort of game for them. Google to an extent as well, because obviously they do the same thing. But it seemed like Facebook was kicking up the biggest stink about it by taking out ads and all that sort of stuff. The latest, I guess, now is Apple's come out and sorry, I should say Tim Cook. He came out and he made the I'm just trying to see if I can find the comment here, but effectively he was saying that we're in an era of so much disinformation and all that sort of thing. Privacy is going to be one of the biggest important things going forward. He didn't openly question Facebook by name, but it was implied in his comments that Facebook's business model is working against the common good, I guess, for lack of a better term. And Apple's implementation of this iOS tracking feature is just sort of like it's still an extension of their overall focus on privacy and efforts to that extent. But obviously, it's led to more toing and froing between the companies about how upset Facebook is about the fact that Apple's going to potentially start blocking users, or at least giving users the choice to have Facebook stop tracking them in their apps.
Yeah, well, I think it's about time, and I really don't know what Facebook is complaining about. No, you know what? If you don't want to be tracked, then what's Facebook's business model then.
Mm.
It is, you need to be tracked, which is fine. But you might as well then not say that you're a social for everyone. And that's probably my biggest issue with, I guess, the Facebook argument, is that not only do they take your data, which, okay, is fair enough, that's an exchange if you want to use the platform, but I guess the thing that really I find, I guess, questionable is that if you are trying to do business, say, on Facebook, then your audience is curated and it's not natural. So it's restricted and it's only down to what Facebook wants you to get. So, in fact, Facebook at both ends, at the individual level, control your data. And then even for the advertising, they control the reach and the targeting as well. And that, as I think Tim Cook said, really just turns the business model into a very murky sort of, and questionable business model. Because what is it about? It's not actually about social media anymore. It's not actually about connecting people. It's actually about transaction with every interaction you have with Facebook, whether you're a Facebook user or whether you're an advertiser or a business on Facebook. And do you want every post on Facebook to become a transaction, a business transaction that opens you to an advertiser and then uses you to endorse an advertiser to your collective, So, I can understand if that's what Facebook want to do, but then I think Facebook would have to be upfront with exactly where your data's going with every post.
Exactly. So I did find the quote. So Cook basically said, at a moment of rampant disinformation and conspiracy theories juiced by algorithms, we can no longer turn a blind eye to a theory of technology that says all engagement is good engagement. The longer the better, and all with the goal of collecting as much data as possible. And I think that's the other aspect to it. So you mentioned like the transactional nature with you being opened up to advertisers, etc. But the more sinister aspect to it, of course, is also the fact that what he was saying about disinformation and conspiracy theories and getting pushed in certain directions, because that same algorithm that might be bringing people together to, I don't know, bake cakes all the time or make the best cake wherever, something innocuous like that, is also sending people down conspiracy theory rabbit holes and dangerous ones. And regardless of which one it is, Facebook's making money off it. So, and that's really where it's not so good.
That's precisely, and that's a really good point, Ben, because I use the term advertising, and effectively that's what's happening. So the disinformation, the nasty sort of things that are hidden to many people on Facebook but are happening behind the scenes, the really undesirable aspects of human nature, are effectively their advertising transactions that put these groups together to do whatever nefarious things they want to do. And Zuck might not be able to admit that. He might not want to believe it, but it's true.
And it might be, uncomfortable for him. The idea that he'd have to, I'm being generous by saying that, by having to chop off a certain amount of revenue to maybe put a stop to the darker stuff. But then it becomes a question of how can they do that anyway without affecting things that are not that may be fine and innocuous.
I've maintained this for a long time, and I think that the good bit of Facebook is not the profitable part of Facebook. So maybe just leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly. Just finally, from a technical standpoint, I think this feature came out in the most recent release that just got released the other day. I think it was iOS 14.4. I haven't actually played around with it. I haven't seen like a notification come up or something like that. So I'll have to maybe I'll do a bit more reading and seeing if I can prompt it and see how it actually works. But I guess finally it just reminds me of I think it was an interview that Steve Jobs did, or whether he said it in one of the presentations that he did. I think it might have been an interview where he was talking about privacy, and he said that Apple takes it very seriously, and they said, well, our approach is if there's going to be I guess an event where on your device where you're being asked to provide information about yourself, what we should do as from a responsibility point of view is to give people a prompt to say, are you okay with this information being shared? And then you ask them again, and then you ask them again, and then if they continue to prompt through and say it's fine, then we'll back off. And I think that was kind of the overall approach. And I guess as software gets more sophisticated, etc., and they still want to be able to maintain their approach on privacy, Apple needs to continually update what they're doing to really tighten the screws on that. If they want to stay serious on the caring about user privacy aspect.
Well, that's right, but I think, not to be cynical here, but Apple makes its money from hardware, and privacy is now an additional feature they can offer on their hardware. So it's a commodity that they can actually trade off. So
yeah.
Maybe we're just lucky that it's something that fits very well into their business model. And effectively, I'm all for it for whatever reason that Apple offer it. But I think increasingly it's more and more important. And I think Facebook has been exposed probably over the last 4 or 5 years at the deficiencies of the model. And I think it's unfortunate for Zuck, and it's unfortunate for Facebook. I don't think this is necessarily anti-Facebook sentiment when I speak about it. I think it's just that the business model is inappropriate. And Facebook might make a lot of money from the business model that it's got, but that doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think they kind of have to accept that. I mean, people used to drink drive, but then we came to understand that wasn't a good thing. And as a social behaviour, as a community, and I think you might find that these juiced up algorithms are a little bit the same.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. And I guess something we said before we got on, probably counts for both stories, actually. Altruism isn't really the primary aspect to any of it. So maybe we should just keep that in mind when thinking about all these things.
No, that's right. Yes, if you are on the share market, think carefully about your investments, and sometimes it's just better to go longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that's it for this week's episode. Don't forget to check out our website, scitechculture.com. All of our links and content there, our YouTube, Vimeo channels, RSS feeds, etc. So you can watch us on any and all of your devices. And thanks for all your visits and for checking us out. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.